President Buhari inaugurates Ore flyover interchange and Ondo Industrial Hub.
Former PDP spokesman Olisa Metu sentenced to 7 years imprisonment for stealing government funds.
Towards successful implementation of free and compulsory education, Kano State Governor orders arrest of Almajiri found roaming the streets.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall continue our conversation on commercialization of research findings. That will be part 2 of the conversation.
All right, now our focus on the commercialization of research findings, which started yesterday on the program, brought together 5 guests. We have 3 of them here in Abuja, 1 in Lagos and another in Kaduna. And in trying to identify why translating research findings into tangible products and services hasn't been quite successful and lucrative in Nigeria, our guests identified several issues.
One of the issues raised by Dr. Dan Azumi Mohammed Ibrahim, the Director General of the National Office for Technology Acquisition and Promotion, NOTAP, is of funding for researchers, particularly in the university environment. He revealed that to survive, the academia now focus on engaging in basic research for publishing to get promoted, instead of research that can contribute to economic development.
Dr. Obi Adigwe, the Director General of NIPRI, that is the Institute for Pharmaceutical Research, emphasized that government usually would take a back seat from research funding in developed countries, which he says is the case now for most other countries, but that the job is left for the NGOs, the rich, and the private sector who would want to make an impact and breakthrough in health and other sectors. And he mentioned some of the successes in getting some of NIPRI's research findings into the market in the country and elsewhere around the world.
Another head of the Research Institute, Professor Mohammed Haruna, on the panel, in his capacity as the Executive Vice Chairman, Naseni, spoke on the need for originality and the ability of a research finding to be need-oriented and able to be reproduced for commercial use and profit, as the commercialization process is usually centered on mass production, distribution, and marketing. He said funds must be available to mitigate the risk of taking an unknown product into the market, which he says is lacking in the sector in Nigeria.
All right, now we also had the acting DG of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, Mr. Ambrose Oruche, who was in Lagos. And he said that research works are not readily available in places where the investors can find them. He therefore called for interaction, exchange of ideas and understanding between investors and researchers so that researchers, according to him, can stop winking in the dark.
Yes, and Professor Emmanuel Ike Ikane, Deputy Director, National Agricultural Extension Research Liaison Services from Ahmadu Bello University's area, who joined the conversation from Kaduna, admitted that there are no less than 250 commercial viable research products in the agricultural sector already. He agreed that for research to be attractive, it must appeal to the felt needs of the people. He blames the fact that actors in commerce and entrepreneurs who usually go for what will give them profit.
All right, now the guest also hinted at the poor culture of intellectual property protection in research establishments in the country, and in particular the DG, if you recall, Kirian of NOTAP, indicated measures that are already being taken to sensitize researchers on the need to protect the intellectual property of their research findings, plus, of course, steps that would need to be taken with regard to marketing research products. All right, so today, of course, we're going to continue with the conversation as we indicated, and we're going to have another set of guests here with us in the Abuja studios as well as at our network centers.
All right. Well, I was just about to raise some of the issues brought in by one of the guests yesterday, which was really key. That's Dr. B. Adigwe of NIBRID, who mentioned some research findings on 4 diseases, including diabetes and tuberculosis, currently gathering dust in the shelves without funds to take them to the commercial stage. So he was saying, how can the rich Nigerians and private organizations be encouraged to fund research and commercialization of these findings? And we shall be raising these issues again today, as Kinsley rightly pointed out, with the new set of guests that we're going to have on Good Morning Nigeria today. Of course, the topic is the commercialization of research findings. Many thanks for joining us. My name is Kirian Umayo.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Kirian to also welcome me to the program, in the course of which we have our regular complimentary segments. And these include newspaper review, business, and others. In the meantime, let's take the highlights of the news. And here is Comfort Ambodo. Good morning, Comfort.
Good morning, Kinsley and Kirian. Here's the morning news. 2 iconic projects, the Ore Flyover Interchange, as well as Ondo Industrial Hub, have been inaugurated by President Mahmoud Buhari. The projects executed by the Akeredolu administration are aimed at enhancing job opportunities and socio-economic development of the Sunshine State.
I follow the road and I have seen the problem, and I congratulate the governor for this success story, identifying his strategic position and the investment he has made for Nigerians and I think for himself, because this is a permanent infrastructure. People will remember him for it.
Before this redemption bridge, a lot of carnage happened as our people tried to traverse from the south to go and do business or for any other thing in the central or not. We gave promise when we were campaigning, and we decided we must keep the promise.
More than 40 million micro, small and medium enterprises has so far been captured into the Small and Medium Enterprises Development Agency's database. The focus is to get as many small-scale operators as possible registered and supported with the aim of realizing the desire of Mr. President to take 100 million Nigerians out of poverty.
In terms of impacting on the economy, we see it in terms of the number of new MSMEs that have come on board. We see it in the number of exports. We see it in the number of new products that are in the market, because of course we are talking about local content. People are taking our own local materials and making products that are sold in the Nigerian market. So to that extent, there is a big impact.
Meanwhile, the Senate has continued with its intervention in ensuring that all revenues due to the federal government are remitted into the Federation account as and when due. This time, the legislators are calling for the digitization and automation of collection and remittance of withholding as a way of checking fraud in the system.
And in meeting the federal government's drive and quest for increased and enhanced internally generated revenue at all levels of government.
Let's employ technology to make sure that every kobo that is supposed to go to the coffers of government goes into the coffers of government.
To investigate this matter and ensure that all withholding tax revenues on both bank deposits and dividends are recovered and report back to the Senate in 4 weeks.
Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed has reiterated the federal government's commitment to make the creative industry a viable and lucrative sector. The minister stated this while endorsing a planned roadmap for tourism development by the Director General of the Nigerian Tourism Development Corporation in Abuja.
NTDC is not just the apex organization for tourism, but it's actually at the center of all of these tourist activities.
The beauty about NTDC is whatever the federal government spends money on benefits NTDC. If the Minister for Power builds a new power plant, it's for Nigerians, but it benefits tourists. If there's a new road, it benefits tourists. Anything that is done for the betterment of the life of a Nigerian also affects the lives of the tourists. So all those things are pluses for us in NTDC as well.
The Federal High Court sitting in Abuja has sentenced former spokesman of the PDP, Olisa Metu, to 7 years imprisonment after finding him guilty of stealing government funds. Justice Okon Abang also ordered the winding up of his company, Destro Investments Limited.
And we have been vindicated in our case.
This is a good example of a bad judgment. And we have our appeal in our hands. I still have confidence in the law court, and we are heading upstairs to the 3 wise men to know whether he is right or wrong.
Kano State Governor Abdullahi Umar Ganduje has ordered the arrest of any Almajiri found roaming the streets of Kano to ensure success of the free and compulsory education program in the state. The governor gave the order during the presentation of appointment letters to 7,500 voluntary teachers under the Better Education Service Delivery for All. Instructional materials were also distributed to all integrated Quranic learning centers in the state.
What we call Education Trust Fund. Education Trust Fund, 5% of the internally generated revenue of Kano State will be put into the basket of free education.
You know, we have sensitization and advocacy, we have done a lot, whereby even the Almajiri and their Malams, they are coming to Subeb in order to reach their Dangaya. So I don't think we have any challenges.
And that concludes the news highlights for now. Good morning, Nigeria will continue shortly with Kingsley and Kieran after this break on commercialization of research findings part 2. Stay with us.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, time for business stories, and here is our correspondent, Kunle Adeyeye.
The rise in the nation's gross domestic product for the fourth quarter of the year 2019, according to the National Bureau of Statistics' recent report, has continued to elicit reactions, one of which is coming from the Statistician General of the NBS, Yemi Kale, who explained that though the growth was marginal, it was boosted by certain sectors of the economy. He attributed the significant rise in the GDP to the use of accurate data by policymakers for proper planning.
We are seeing that a lot more data is being used for planning. I know the number of phone calls and data requests I get from policymakers, from private investors. Already this year I've seen about 6 or 7 foreign investors who are thinking of investing in Nigeria. They come to the Bureau of Statistics. They never used to do that before. Most of the challenges we have is more about the quantity of available data, which has to do with funding challenges. But in terms of what is produced, I have no doubt that the quality of data that is produced in Nigeria today is significantly better than it was many years ago.
And economist Tefa Abraham has suggested strengthening of the economic policies and improvement of the best performing sectors to achieve the 2.93% GDP projected in the 2020 budget.
And support them through policy and reforms involving amendment in legislation where necessary, supporting reforms with ICT innovation, and then identify, on the other hand, those sectors that didn't do too well to see how to support them using government incentives and other palliatives that are contained in the 2020 Finance Act.
Next are the details of Tuesday's tradings on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. With business news, I'm Kunle Adeyeye.
Thank you, Kunle, for that business package. Next is weekend newspaper review.
our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Atebe, is right here with us in the studios. As always, Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kinsley. Good morning. Good morning, Kirian.
Good morning, Bayo. You're welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, there are 3 or 4 newspapers to review this morning.
Yeah, that's right. So
yes, let's begin with the Blueprint newspaper. Blueprint newspaper on the right-hand side of the nameplate. We have a tax evasion. Tribunal orders firm to pay FIRS 1.7 billion naira. Details on page 33. Then below that, Kano government bans street begging. It's on 26. It's a very good development there. Directly below the nameplate, don't bill unmetered customers, NEC orders discos. Another interesting development is on page 6. Olu accepts Osho Council of Oba's suspension. It's on page 8. Now the lead story. For 400 million naira fraud, Metu joins Darie Nyame Kalu in jail. With the 3 riders, forfeits 375 million to federal government, bags 7-year sentence. Kudos. Knox as council set for appeal. We are still probing Jonathan's campaign donations, says EFCC. Details of that package is on page 6. Now, the photograph there is, of course, that of Metu after the sentencing. And below that, we have 100,000 displaced in renewed Benue-Ebonyi communal clashes, 5 killed in Ubokolo court rivalry. All that on page 26. Now, at the bottom, Nigerians losing confidence in police, according to Bojabia Miller, that's the Speaker of the House of Representatives, is on page 15. NECO dismisses 19 staff over certificate forgery. On page 7. Federal government generates 1.289 billion naira from land revenue in 3 years. It's captured on page 27. Oshomole plotting to destabilize Edo. That's according to Obaseki, the governor of Edo State. The story is on page 5.
all right, so let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. Above the nameplate, 128 billion naira lost to gas flaring in 11 months. That's according to the NNPC, with details on page 28. Pharmacists and 4 others killed as Benue cultists clash. Immunity for National Assembly principal officers and others divides reps. That's page 2. How Buhari regime depleted ECA, that's excess crude account, by 1.5 trillion naira. That's on page 25. And 2 earpieces there beside the nameplate. Nigeria High Commission owes 3.3 billion naira traffic fees. That's in the UK. Details on page 11. 900 million naira debt. Buhari ex-loyalist Galadima loses house and firm to AMCON. AMCON is the Asset Management Company of Nigeria. Details on page 30. The list story says police need 250,000 rifles, 1,000 APCs, and 774 drones. That's according to the Inspector General of Police. With the rider, Aso Rock and VIPs have depleted personnel meant for main police jobs. And that's attributed to the Police Service Commission. Aso Rock and VIPs have depleted personnel meant for main police jobs. And then South African police got 1.137 trillion naira in 2018. In the meantime, according to the IG, 20 billion naira was given to the Nigeria Police Force. Details of this story you can find on page 2 of the Punch newspaper. And then the photographs there show Metu and some of his relatives after he was sentenced to 7 years imprisonment, and with a commitment to return 375 million naira. The other story about NECO, Kieran has already read. NECO fires 19 workers for certificate forgery. Sokoto top officials arrested for sexually exploiting 12-year-old girl. Kaduna Assembly Speaker resigns. Members elect Zailani. That's on page 17. Established base in Sambisa border areas. Senate tells Army. Remo Stars player. Inspector General disbands Zona SAS and dismisses inspector. And Senate begins probe of banks over tax remittances. That's page 25. Bayo.
Well, Well, Kingsley, the papers are dominated by the story of the trial of Chief Olisa Metu, who has been found guilty of fraud and money laundering by an Abuja Federal High Court. After 6 hours of judgment, Justice Okonaban found him guilty of all the 7 counts for which he has been standing trial for the last 4 years. Chief Metu was found, and his company, Dextract Investment, were found guilty on count 1, 2, 4, and 7, and bagged 7 years each for all, making 28 years. On count 3, he got 5 years, while for count 5 and 6, he bagged 3 years, making a total of 39 years. However, the judge directed that the sentences are to run concurrently, and therefore he is to spend 7 years in correctional facilities. If you look at the background of this one, he was said to have fraudulently received 400 million from the Office of the National Security Advisor in November 2014, and such money were deployed for political activities as well as personal use. The transactions he also indulged in transactions upward of about $2 million without going through a financial institution. And the hallmark for that is that you cannot exceed such transaction beyond 5 million naira. He is to pay to the federal government a sum of 375 million, while his company Dextract is to forfeit $25 million to the federal government. There's a report that Kingsley read about the police. The Inspector General of Police says that apart from shortage of personnel, the police need some facilities to be able to perform its optimal duties to the optimum. 1,000 armored personnel carriers, 250,000 assault rifles, and corresponding ammunitions. Mohammed Adamu told the public hearing of the House of Representatives that 2 million tear gas canisters as well as smoke grenades are also required. The IGP was represented by the DIG Operations, Abdulmajid Ali, and other issues that were raised included the listing of 200,000 riot gun and smoke pistols, 1,000 tracking devices, as well as 774 operational drones. That apparently is 1 drone per local government, 774, so that they will be able to use drones to monitor across the nation. Also harped upon is the poor and dilapidated condition of police barracks. He also drew attention to the low budgetary allocation that are meant for the police. There is also the personnel inadequacy. Presently, it says the Nigeria police strength is 302,000, and this cannot be effectively, they cannot effectively police Nigeria. That leaves us to a ratio of 1 policeman to about 629 citizens. It's far below the UN requirement of 1 to 400, I think, 1 to 400 or 1 to 450. So there's need to recruit more personnel. Also, the police in the Edo have succeeded in arresting an alleged kidnap kingpin at Sapele, Delta State. The 48-year-old man, identified as Lucky Sagba Alebi, had led a team of kidnappers to Ogba, and when they got to Benin, they invaded the premises and fraternized with the policemen. They engaged them in a drinking spree, and before you knew it, they killed an inspector and 2 sergeants. They eventually abducted Mr. Hanire and took him to Ogba River and moved him away on a speedboat. The police were able to eventually arrest him. They had demanded a ransom of about $65 million, 65 million naira. The amount was demanded in dollars. However, the receiver, one of them, only delivered $42 million to the other. So you see, there's no honor even among thieves.
Oh yeah, I think one interesting story is that of the police. You know, if you ask me, because of the security situation in the country, and if the nation is under-policed, and we have several areas across the nation that are governed, right? Then of course it means that all the efforts being made to secure the nation would have been in vain. They need the the tools, the equipment. These days we're talking technology, and that is what is prevailing all over the world. And for you to track criminality, you must underline, use technology to the highest level, because the operational method of today's criminals is quite different from what we used to have. So you need an extra device or devices, as it were, to be able to track them. Otherwise, nothing is going to work in that direction.
Do you know that sadly, even the ordinary walkie-talkie, I don't see them with our police. So that if on the highway, a criminal or somebody who has committed an offense is at point A, there are several police vehicles along the highway, like for instance in Abuja city. All you're required to do, you don't have to give him a chase. All you need to do, take the particulars and radio ahead to the next point, and they will look out for him and arrest him. But just simple walkie-talkie is not available.
Yeah, there's radio communication.
Yes.
I mean, there's no question about it. But I mean, as gentlemen, as you have said, the police, they need personnel, they need equipment, they need motivation and much better pay. This is quite different from the campaign, for either state police or community police. It's an issue that, of course, has been and is still being discussed extensively. But let's face it, if they want to use this approach that is often referred to as a kinetic, that alone will not suffice. Look, we used to have in this country a situation where armed robbery was the most vicious crime that people could commit, criminals could commit. And one of the arguments then was that the weapons of the police were outdated. They had this long Mark IV rifle, which was often derided as cock and shoot, whereas the criminals were now having SLR, that is self-loading rifles. And then, of course, the police have upgraded their own weaponry. But you have new forms of criminality coming on. 250,000 rifles is a lot. Are we going to a war situation? If you say we are in a war situation, fine. We also have to think of other measures of reducing criminal activities. There are socio-economic factors which we also have to work hard on. But one of the things that is indicated here, which doesn't require any purchase of guns or rifles, says Aso Rock VIPs depleted personnel meant for main police jobs. That's according to the Police Service Commission. Well, it is not just Aso Rock. All government houses, ministries, commissioners' offices, MDAs. Look, is it so difficult to start with that one and say, look, okay, gentlemen, we think that we are denying Nigerians the benefit of our personnel. Yes. Because you go to these offices, you find the policemen there, their uniforms very well starched, and they are all waiting to jump up and say, welcome, sir, welcome, sir. Whereas the job is on the beat, it's on the street, it's on the road. So let us reduce the number in the first instance, and then see if you mobilize them, to their regular beats, and see how that will work in the first. As they are in those offices, they are all armed. These are the weapons the ordinary should be using against kidnappers and other people on the road.
It's a very simple analogy. It doesn't need, it's not complex, for us to understand the need for the number of police personnel attached to the VIPs. You can see some 10 policemen, one person, 10 policemen following. I will be wondering, I don't know, the kind of powers, that they have, especially even individuals who are not even officials of government, rich men. They have a number of policemen following them on daily basis, and at every point in time, wherever he goes, they are there. So it's important.
There's also another development.
Bayo, you mentioned this appropriately, that they say they need 774 drones.
Yes.
That's one drone per local government.
That's my own.
No, that's it. But let's be realistic.
Yes.
Look, Lagos has on the constitution 20 local governments. Lagos is urban. Are you going to have 20 drones flying around in Lagos? 20 drones? I mean, let's be realistic. You don't need...
But you need to have space as well. Don't just have to you need to have space as well.
Precisely. Precisely. Not that you just say, in Kano, for instance, assume it is one per local government. You're going to have 40 drones in the air in Kano.
One per local government is my guess.
I'm just saying.
It's my guess. But I don't know how they will.
Let's talk about manageable numbers. Yes. And then this analogy of South African police getting this one and they getting 20 billion. This 20 billion does not take into reckoning expenses by state governments.
Okay, yes, in support of the police. Exactly. Now, the other area I was trying to draw attention to is Nigeria Electricity Regulation Commission has said that unmetered electricity consumers cannot be charged more than 1,800 naira a month. So the NERC has now put out an order 197, signed by the chairman of the commission, Professor James Mombo, and the commissioner for legal services. He now says that an average of 1,800 naira is the monthly token that anybody can be charged with effect from 20th of February 2002. The NERC also says that electricity consumers that have grown from 5 million in 2012, and now the population is about 10 million by December of 2019. And guess what? Only 52% of these are metered. So out of the 10 million, you have about 5,200,000 still not metered.
Metered, exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so let's take some.
Yeah,
Just quickly take some newspaper. On the right-hand side of the nameplate, we have a Boko Haram chief judge killed in airstrike. ISWAP camp in disarray as Ame Abagana emerges factional leader. Is page 39. Boko Haram chief judge killed in an airstrike. Okay, now the lead story, it says insurgency. Senate orders military back to Sambisa, with the right Catholic bishops to hold nationwide protest Sunday. What is interesting in this is what is displayed here by the Custom Area Controller Oyo Oshi Command, Ellen Ngozi, and that's seized foreign rice, of course, and used tires. Now there's a label, spoils for war over electricity tariff, VAT hike. That's on page 40. And now, the reps vote in favor of immunity for presiding officers.
Yeah, I also read that from the Punch. That's the re-emphasis. But let's just mention the editorial so that Bayo can take everything together very quickly. Editorial is from the Nation newspaper, and it's at page 17. It says, train to move petrol and gas. It says, without that, optimal use of passenger and cargo trains is a sure way for the country to pay off huge loans taken to finance old and new rail lines.
Yes, at the House of Representatives yesterday, there was a proposition that immunity should be extended to the presiding officers of the National Assembly. That is the Senate President and his deputy, the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker, as well as the presiding officers in the states, the speakers of the State Houses of Assembly and their deputy. Opinions were divided. One member cited the instance that when, for instance, Senate President Saraki was being tried, all of them as members felt a little bit uncomfortable. Others said that they are arguing that even the immunity provided for the executive president, vice president, governors and their deputy should be removed because nobody is above the law. But at the Senate had a different approach altogether. The Senate has now given its Committee on Banking, Insurance and Financial 4 weeks to report back to look at non-remittances of taxes and bank deposits as well as withholding tax. You know, Kingsley has always harped on this. How is the withholding tax taken by banks remitted? And now the Senate has taken this on. Senator Ekunife was the one that moved the motion, and the House has been given 4 weeks to tackle that and report that.
All right.
Talking about haulage now.
Editorial, yes.
Yes, the haulage. Well, it's simple. The Petroleum Equalizing Fund says that the moment train services stabilize, they are going to stop haulage of petroleum and gas products by highway. Only last week, a tanker was moving on Otedola Bridge. Its compartment got open and petrol kept on spilling. Luckily, fire services intervened. If not, nobody could have imagined the kind of catastrophe that could have happened. So what they are saying that by the time the services stabilize, they will use train haulage. One moving train wagon can carry as many as 10, 15 tankers. Yeah. And each tanker on the train can carry more than 33,000 liters exactly. that one tanker carries. So that will be, they also emphasize the need to ensure that refineries are properly rehabilitated and also pipelines are properly put in place so that you reduce haulage by highway.
All right, Bayo Atoyebe, thank you for being around. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Thank you too.
Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we shall be taking on the second part of our discussion on the commercialization of research findings.
Thank you for staying with us. And just before we go into our second part of the discussion on commercialization of research findings, here are excerpts of points raised by guests yesterday as put together by Aisha Ubali.
The private sectors are looking at another side. And unless the two of them will come to converge on a point, the vibrancy of our research and development efforts is highly unlikely to translate into products and services. Yes, the researchers, first of all, you have to understand the environment under which they operate, particularly in the universities and most of the research establishments. Funding is an issue.
Investors can patronize and commercialize this investment. That's one aspect. Another aspect we have also carried out was to have an MOU with Chemical Society of Nigeria, because we believe that Chemical Society of Nigeria has a lot of researchers.
By implication, saying that the actors in commerce are entrepreneurs. They go for what gives them profits, and they go for any solution that's meeting their needs. For any research to be attractive to the industries, it must start from felt need.
There are numerous products in the shelf that are patented, yet the challenges of taking them to the market is there. The problem is not only peculiar to Nigeria, but elsewhere they have found way of making this feasible. Now, the frustrating issues now is that if you produce a product and you want to mass produce it, and you approach the developing economy to help you produce machine or establish manufacturing plant, they will tell you this is not viable, this discourage you.
We need to move away from professors with hundreds of publications and zero impact to research that actually impacts on people's lives. So one of the things we've done in NIPRID is that we've developed the contextual processing protocol, which has mapped natural resources across the 36 states of Nigeria and developed processing mechanisms using local people to harness those local products, process them, and get them either to the Nigerian market or ready for exportation.
All right, now those were excerpts from our guests yesterday when we took on the first part of this conversation. We also have guests with us here in the studios as well as at our Lagos Network Center. All three guests are familiar faces on Good Morning Nigeria. First, let's welcome Dr. Umar Bindri. Dr. Umar Bindri is a former Director General of the National Office for Technology Acquisition and Promotion. That's NOTAP. He's also currently Baban Mufti of Adamawa Emirate Council. That's why you see him in this mufti that he is in. Dr. Umar Bindri, former Secretary to the State Government of Adamawa, as well. Pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning.
Thank you, and good morning, Nigeria.
Okay. Also here with us in the studios is distinguished Senator Sabi Abdullahi. Sabi Abdullahi is currently the Deputy Chief Whip of the Senate. In the 8th Senate, he was the spokesman of the Senate. But in an earlier career, he was head of planning and institutional development at the Agricultural Research Council of Nigeria. Distinguished Senator, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
My pleasure to be here. Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay, and joining us from Lagos, investment banker and financial analyst, Mr. Tilewa Adebajo. Mr. Tilewa Adebajo, delight to have you again on Good Morning Nigeria. Good Morning Nigeria.
You're all welcome once again. We had a very good outing yesterday when we had 5 guests who deliberated on this particular topic, and that's on commercialization of research findings. Let's begin this conversation by asking Dr. Omar Binde to take the first question. Sir, you have been an advocate of commercialization of research results. Then your capacity as the DG of NOTAB, and of course I know that you made frantic efforts to see how you can, there can be a connect, if you like, between the laboratory and of course the floor of the manufacturing sector. How has it been? Let's share your view on what the situation is currently in the country, and what should be the next option.
Thank you very much. A very important subject for our dear country. But I mean, when you discuss science, technology, and innovation, in most cases, if you're not careful, the common man is not connected, because when you say science, people think you're talking about chemistry, physics, mathematics, and so on. But this science, technology, and innovation, you can take it on the value chain principle as 3 ecosystems. The science ecosystem is where people with ability to investigate, to philosophize, to gather information, to collect data, analyze it, and come up with information on possibilities of solutions. And normally people who work in this ecosystem are very high-powered people. They have PhDs, some grow to become professors, very expensive people. They use laboratories and workshops that are very expensive tools. But what do you get out of it? You get information, publications, popularity in terms of ranking of science. If you are only collecting these people and developing this sector, you will never go anywhere, because you need another pool or another ecosystem. That takes you to the technology and engineering ecosystem, where you have people also high wage paid, very well trained, who have the ability to transform this knowledge from the science ecosystem to give you what we traditionally call technology. And technology is intangible in most cases. And the measure for technology is intellectual property. It means this is the property of your brain that are solutions based on the knowledge from the science ecosystem. This is where Nigeria has started to get it wrong. Our understanding and comprehension and maturity of the intellectual property system is very, very weak. But even at intellectual property system, all the patents I had yesterday, patents, it's only a piece of paper. Trademark is only a mark. Industrial design is a packaging tool. Licensing, all these things are things that are intangible. It's very difficult to see you moving with it. Now, if you stop here, you're only talking about prototypes and then examples of solutions. That is what most of the DGs were telling you yesterday. In a research institute, you only see examples. It's not the product. It's a prototype. So if you stop here, you have limited usage. You need another group, which is where innovation comes in. It is in the innovation sector where you find that people are licensing this intellectual property to enter business. Lawyers are participating to protect your intellectual property. If somebody infringes, they take them to court. Bankers are coming in to provide resources to make sure that you take it to the next level. Marketers are now telling people that this is good compared to competition. People who are dancing in arts and so on are a fantastic part of this, because they are the people who brand. You see Coca-Cola on TV, they are dancing with bottles. This is part of the science, technology, and innovation. Again, so when you pull all this, you find that the technology moves to the market smoothly. But certainly, as we discussed, you will see where within the bandwidth of these ecosystems does Nigeria have challenges.
Fantastic. Dr. Omar Binde, thanks a lot. Distinguished Senator Sabi Abdullahi, let's take the advantage of your experience in the Agricultural Research Council to let us know what went on while you were there in terms of research, and then taking it from the various ecosystems into our dining tables, and as well as, of course, as ingredients in the factories.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Like the last speaker said, this is a very important subject. And what I have seen clearly from my own experience is the fact that this intangible thing Dr. Binde talked about is actually the bane of our country. Because most of the time, either the political class who are the headship of these institutions, or even the top policy makers, when you talk about quick fix, you are in a hurry to get certain things done, then that is where you miss the point. And as far as research is concerned, of course, like he has rightly pointed out, most of these things are intangible until you are able to get something out at the end of the day that is of value to society. Now, the process through which this happens is where I think we've missed the point. And in our own experience, for example, what happened is clearly a shift. There was a paradigm shift from research and development model before. Because when you say research and development, it presupposes that you do research somewhere and then you take it to somewhere for development. Now, that concept was changed to research for development. And that is what has been defined as the innovation system perspective, whereby you are looking at a particular research system from the perspective of everybody who is linked to whatever value that is supposed to come out of it. Because, like Dr. Binder said, when you do the first stage, which is the basic research, you get all the knowledges and everything that you piece together and say, oh, when you add this knowledge to this knowledge to that knowledge to this knowledge, it is possible for you to come out with this kind of product, which is the technology. Now, by the time you are able to get that, then you will now begin to talk about what they call proof of concept. And at that stage of proof of concept is to show that, oh, this knowledge is actually going to be able to produce that thing. And when you do that, you demonstrate it in the laboratory, then you move away from the laboratory to a environment where you think this should happen. That is the prototype he's talking about. Now, by the time you get to the prototype, the next thing is for you to now begin to think about how you can produce this at a commercial scale. And so at this stage, you are talking about the scalability, you are talking about the economy of scale you are able to bring into it, and then most importantly, the utility of the product. Because the moment the utility is not there, you can be rest assured that nobody will take it. And so even when you see research fairs or demonstrations or whatever, those prototypes, sometimes when you ask that they should go and reproduce it, it's so expensive. And so within the concept of economy of scale, it's not cheap. So this is where we have the key issue. And secondly, for all of these things to work, the earlier issues he talked about, the issue of patent, trademark, industrial design, and the like, must also come in. And where that is not there, an investor will not be interested. Because I need to also have assurance that if I put my money, I have certain period within which to recoup my money. And in Nigeria, unfortunately, all our research in the Research Institute are seen as public goods. And because they are seen as public goods, we have refused to move into that realm where we should begin to put some intangible measure to it in the like of the patent, in the like of the trademark, and so that at the end, with that, you can get people who will come in, take these things up, and move it to the next level, which is in terms of getting it to the market.
All right, so we'll turn to you basically to also talk about what the lawmakers, can bring into this, to see how policies or laws can be made to ensure that whatever research result that we have in this country is translated to practical reality. For now, let's go to Lagos, where we have Tilawa Adebajo, who is an investment banker. He's from our Lagos Network Center. Mr. Adebajo, you've listened to our two guests here in Abuja, and we are trying to see how the possibility of ensuring that the private sector, keys into the litany of research results here and there, or prototypes that may have been produced by research institutes yearning for commercialization. Of course, the two guests here have detailed what it takes, before you begin to talk about, commercialization in terms of registration, licensing, and what have you. What, in your opinion, is the hindrance that is making it impossible for manufacturers or investors like you, to key into research results that are already available in so many laboratories across the nation?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I think Dr. Umar has made a very important point in the sense that the key thing is that the respect for intellectual property, I think, is very important. Trademarks, patents, and piracy, because we have a propensity in Nigeria to pirate things, fake products. All these things do not augur well in terms of investors trying to put money in your market if you cannot ban piracy. So when you have a lot of fake products and piracy and you don't respect intellectual property, I think that, of course, is not a very positive signal for investors. And I think Dr. Omar has articulated a very important point in terms of respect for intellectual property rights. I think that has to be done, and enforcement needs to be in place. And I think if you have that legal and regulatory framework that protects you, I think definitely, that will be a positive. I also want to take up from what Senator Abdullahi has said. And I think that since he's in the Senate, I think it's important that the legal and regulatory framework needs to be strengthened and established. But he did mention something that was quite important, which is the issue of value. What is the value of the products that you're putting in place? And what kind of returns on investments can it produce? I think it's important to understand that, there is a market, and whatever research you're doing has to be relevant to society and also to industry. If you take a look at what happens abroad, let's take a look at a company like most companies in the United States and in Europe especially have all their research and development done either in Europe or in America. All the designs and all the product testings, they're done there. But when it comes to manufacturing, they all go to China to manufacture in China, because China is more competitive and it gives them that economies of scale that the senator was talking about. And then from China, they're able to export their products all over the world. Apple, for instance, design all their phones in the States and all their products. All their screens are made in Korea by Samsung, and Samsung ships them to China, where everything is assembled with other parts coming from various parts of the world, including the microchips from people like Intel, which is an American-based company. But of course, China, you also understand that when you're in globalization, you have to be able to factor in where the economies of scale are. And I think investors will begin to take a look at where that happens. But I think one thing that is not happening in Nigeria is that you find that even companies like Apple, General Motors, even the big companies have programs in all the top universities in America whereby they're funding research to be able to improve their products. So I think what is important in Nigeria is that the intellectual group of people within our research facilities must align themselves with industry, and industry must find relevance in what they're doing. If industry finds relevance in what they're doing, then it is those industries that tend to benefit from the results of their research will begin to fund the research in those universities that will begin to develop their products across a spectrum of industry. So I think that is really what we need in Nigeria now, that alignment to ensure that most of your research is being supported by industrial grants. Then you can begin to see the sort of synergies that we're talking about.
Mr. Tilewa Adebayo, I still would like to stay with you. Some of the points that you have raised now, you are actually reinforcing part of what was said yesterday in terms of the linkages between the town and gown. The town here referring to industry, and the gown referring to research institutes as well as the universities. I was just wondering, yesterday, for instance, one of our guests indicated that there are some 250 agricultural research results. And unfortunately, most of these research findings are on the shelves. Naseni, which is engineering, also has its own prototypes, littering the entire works. And part of what came up was that, look, the commercialization challenge also rests with the fact that we don't appear to have venture capitalists who are taking up these products, even though one of the guests also stated that knowledge of the availability of the research findings is weak. In the investment sector in the country, is there an appetite to pick up these research results and utilize them for purposes of developing products and services?
I think without a doubt, I think investment is about deploying capital and be able to make a return. As you know, I mean, what banking or investment is intermediation. You're mobilizing savings from a group of people, and those people you're mobilizing savings from are going to demand a return. And in terms of demand a return, you have to be able to deploy that capital to people who can use it profitably to make returns. So everybody's looking for ideas, but of course we're still when you take a look at venture capital, which is the sort of capital that will be quite innovative and to be able to take risk capital, that industry unfortunately in Nigeria is not very well developed, and I think that in this country is what we need most. Venture capital, risk capital is what we need most. That is what has made America in terms of Silicon Valley, where 10 years ago, you never heard of a company that was Netflix. You never heard of a company that was even companies like Google. 20 years ago, they were not there. Amazon, for instance, is now one of the top listed companies. 15, 20 years ago, these companies did not exist. But you find a situation whereby risk capital or venture capital, especially in the Silicon Valley, is what has driven tech. Because there are people who understand this business, they're able to risk their money and to take a company from the inception stage or from the conceptual stage all the way through to product development, manufacturing in China, and of course taking these products to market, and of course to be able to support it with the capital. It's a skill. And in a country like Nigeria, that is the sort of capital that we need. Because the banks really are there to support you with working capital. Private equity is looking to look at already existing companies that have got through that stage and taken it away. In Nigeria, there is that massive gap in venture capital to be able to take that risk capital to be able to look at innovation. So that's where you have that problem. But having said that, I think even if you have a product, we don't have the incubation system, because what you tend to do is that you call them not only venture capitalists but angel investors. But in America, you have a highly developed incubation system whereby people have learned how to bring in their products, their test results into a system, and whereby people can look at them, assess the needs, and begin to push them through the system. And this is a continuous process in the States. And the companies that do well are able to pay for the ones that, we have some ideas come and go in America, you never even hear about them. But companies make money from a few big ones that do very well. So that venture capital that we need in Nigeria and that industry does not really exist. So you don't have a structured way to be able to look at this research and to be able to see how you want to manufacture them. In agriculture, for instance, we've seen all kinds of mini tractors, maybe things like for SMEs that are based on garden lawnmowers. In America, you have motorized garden lawnmowers, which are very popular and I think sell commercially. People are beginning to look at that product to see how you might want to modify it for the smallholder farmers in Nigeria. But the question is that if you do that, can they really afford it, and what those businesses are? So there are many things that we need to do to be able to create for our own market. But unfortunately, that incubation system, that structure, and the venture capital does not exist.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. Let's return to our studio here, and I'd like to bring in Dr. Omar Bindu. Dr. Bindu, you've come a long way, with the understanding of what commercialization of research results should be. And our guest in Lagos now raised a very pertinent issue, which is that of lack of a structure, a methodology that could be adopted to see how some of the very useful findings, are commercialized. For instance, the Dr. Abuja of Nigerian yesterday said that they have drugs that can address the issue of diabetes, tuberculosis. And he has made frantic efforts to see how the private sector can key into this, and of course, so that they can mass produce such drugs. Of course, they have one special drug for sickle cell anemia, which stands out, globally, as a very good medicine. So, tell us what that structure that should be, and what is possible in terms of understanding the attitude of Nigerian businessman who wants his profit, who believes in short-term measures, right? So, what is the real issue here, and how can it be addressed?
Well, just like any developing country, the public system has to be responsible to spark things up. And we are not different to any country. 98% of research facilities in Nigeria are public. They are either government research institutions or research that happens in government, state, or federal universities. There's very little research that is happening in many private universities. Now, what galvanizes this coordination that he's talking about is, number one, because there is public dominance in it, the public policy on science, technology, and innovation has to be solid. But we don't seem to mature out of policy. Every time you get an administration, you drop back to policy and you start reviewing the previous policy. We don't move to the next level. We went all, half of my science, technology, and innovation career was in the ministry. And all that career was just on policy, if you know what I mean. So the second thing is, in that policy, Nigeria has a policy. And in that policy, the two things that was expected to facilitate, I'm happy that distinguished senator is here, are number one, you remember, Kieran, that we said there has to be a national research or science, technology, and innovation council. Now, you see, the Minister of Science and Technology is not like Minister of Agriculture. Minister of Agriculture can get 10 billion or 20 billion. He'll go and buy tractors, tell the president, Oga, we've bought the tractors, we want you to launch it. President is happy, and you go and you see tractors, you clap, and then he is home and dry. Minister of Health, the same thing, hospitals with imported equipment and everything. But how does the Minister of Science and Technology report to the president? He cannot go to the president and say, Your Excellency, we have 2,000 publications, and this is the compendium, we want you to read it. That is tasteless, if you know what I mean. The Minister of Science and Technology cannot survive if the president does not help him in a council to say that, hey, Minister of Agriculture, we learned that Naseni has come up with a small tractor. I want this tractor to be able to be commercialized to the extent that you, instead of importing tractors, we're importing it from either Bindir metallurgical factory or whatever. To do that, he points at Minister of Commerce and says, whatever it takes to find finance, central bank, whoever, Minister of Finance, this thing has to come out. Then he'll turn out to Minister of Information. Information. Nigerians must know about this. So this council, where this coordination happens, has to be there, and we put it in that policy. To ginger this council to take off is a challenge. Why? Because our country is contract-based. The benefit of things is contract. The discipline or industry is all contract. So for you to make it and sell it and manufacture it in the country, to create the jobs and the branding and everything, there won't be contract. And if there's no contract, that 10% will not come out, and so on and so forth. The story is set.
I'm sorry, let me come in here so you can take this along. I thought that the Minister of Science and Technology, Chief Ogbonnaya Onu, has often beat his chest as one of his accomplishments, the setting up of this specific council, which had been, the idea had been on the cards for 30 years. So he said that the council has been set up, but whether the council is up and running now is what I wouldn't know. Are you familiar with this?
Yes, this is the issue. We've all seen on TV, the council was there, the president has accepted to chair the council, if you know what I mean. The thing is that the council is not just, to meet. It's about the tractors coming out. It's about the Nicosan, sickle cell anemia, becoming a global drug prescribed on our shelves. Mystomate for ulcer to come on the shelf. It's about the drones invented by Naseni and NASDA to come on top. It is about the space capabilities of NICOMSA to come on top. This is the issue of the council, if you know what I mean. And now to do that, every country that is serious with science, technology, and innovation in that policy, there has to be a science, technology, and innovation fund. Because unless, the standard is that you go to university today, ask the university, in the last 10 years, can you give us the book of abstracts of your research? This room will not contain it. But if you ask the question, how much of this information has been able to transit to solutions for Nigerians, to solve our poverty problem, to solve our environmental problem, to solve our agriculture problem, the standard normally is between 20 to 25%. This is where most research institutes and universities have got challenges. It's very difficult to tell you. Probably in some is actually zero or whatever. You get what I mean? So that nobody, like the banker said, will fund this kind of thing. I fund you, you produce things, and you just live on the shelf. So there has to be a research fund, and I could remember from Obasanjo time, through to President Goodluck Jonathan, through President Yaradua, through President Goodluck again, up to now, that research fund is in that policy. To take off, I remember when Honorable Minister Mrs. Okonjo-Iweala said, she just said, we had a meeting for the president directed that this fund must come up. She just said, we are not good at managing funds. She started listing PTDF, ETF, blah, blah. We just use it for this. If you establish this research fund, it will then again be used for, but this fund, whether we like it or not, has to come on top to make sure that it works. The reason is because, you see, the refinement of our thinking too has to come in play. I mean, today, we are 200 million people in Nigeria. Probably 100 million people eat pomo. But do you know that if you want to go to all the research institutes and all the universities, look at a research paper on pomo, you probably will not get it. I made a presentation somewhere. It's only one woman who said, yeah, they tried to look at link to leather, why people are eating pomo and leather and whatever. But pomo, everywhere, when you go to doctors, they say, don't eat salt, it will kill you. Don't eat sugar, it will kill you. Don't eat fat, it will kill you. Here we have pomo.
Don't eat too much of it.
Yes.
Too much, yes.
There is no sugar in pomo. There is no fat in pomo. There is no salt in pomo. It's sterile, so we have been able to invent a food that anybody can eat. Instead of us to do research to make sure that you can even look at a cow and say, the pomo on this cow will be sweet. And then to come up with technology of pomo wafers, 0.5 millimeter, so the Japanese will eat it. You impregnate it, you fortify it with solid minerals and macronutrients and minerals, so that people are eating it for whatever. No, we just eat it and we don't have the knowledge about it. Before I stop, I want to also take you, look at our Chapman. It's Nigerian invention. But we're at a level where the big cup, we chop oranges and so on inside. Cucumber. It took an Indian company, the manufacturers of Lacasera, they came. Now they have Smooth. They just took it and then mechanized it, and Smooth is selling. We even now forgot about that. The same thing happened with our Chin-Chin. Chin-Chin is our own invention. It can stay on the shelf for years. It again took these same manufacturers of Indomie. This is food. Nigerians are wasting time. They mechanized it. Now you see mini Chin-Chin. So it's not that Nigeria hasn't gotten it right, but there's something missing somewhere. And the implementation of this policy to the letter practically is the key.
Yeah, so, the issue of the Technology Council, has been there. As a matter of fact, it was when the current president was the head of state. But the point is that after that, no head of state or president, as it were, has ever chaired it died a natural death. But it was resurrected, in 2015 when Buhari came to power. That was when Dr. Bonionu was saying that coming back, that the progress is being made. And I'm sure he's also working on the issue of having a technology fund. That is in the offing. But now, let's turn to Senator Sabi Abdullahi. Sabi Abdullahi, during the Obasanjo administration, he requested from UNESCO to draw a master plan of technological advancement for Nigeria. And when UNESCO came up with a blueprint, UNESCO advised other African nations to key into that. I think Senegal, now Rwanda, that are keen to that. I never did anything about it. I don't know the content of it, but I know that it's a developmental plan that can lift us from where we are to where we want to be technologically. Now, you having agri background is quite interesting. WAP, you know about WAP? West African Agricultural Program, which is a productivity program backed by the World Bank. And in that WAP, so many researches came on board, even for cowpea, for cassava, yam, and what have you. But I don't think that we have leveraged on that, in advancing further, in our technology, in our agricultural sector, or what's your take?
Well, you see, the issues sometimes are very painful because you know exactly this country has what it takes to get it right. People have worked so hard to put in place things that can move this country forward. But of course, if you find yourself in the executive arm where you are a public servant and somebody, while you are the one holding the engine, but somebody is the one who will hold the ignition, then you understand the point I'm making. And I would say, for example, when you talk about this plan, we don't need any UNESCO to come and tell us how to put a plan on where to go to. Nigerians are so brilliant. We have very fantastic scientists who actually know what to be done. And I will tell you, the Agri Research Council of Nigeria, for example, came on board in 2006. And of course, that was the second time it was coming on board. It was in place as far back as the 70s before it was disbanded, along with all the other sectoral councils. Now, when we came on board, I remember very vividly, we wanted to get it right. And so you need to do what they call benchmarking. And our benchmark countries then was Embrapa, that is the Brazilian Research Council, South African Agricultural Research Council, and then the Chinese Academy of Agricultural Science. These were the countries we benchmarked. And then ICA of India. Now, we wanted to learn from what they are doing in terms of the successes they are recording. If you look at the success of Embrapa, for example, they were able to move Nigeria from a deficit country into a net importer in many commodities, competing with the US, Australia, and many other countries. India was able to use the product of research to move themselves from a deficit country in terms of food to a country that has self-sufficiency and is importing. So I think the point I want to make here is that there are so many things that was put in place, but these things are not being allowed to be implemented. And I'll give you a classical example. If you check the ARCN Act, it says you are supposed to develop a master plan for the country, for which all the other research institutes are now supposed to key in. And what does that mean? If you take the issue of Pomo he's talking about, for example, which is a livestock product, you should have a national program. Now, if the national program is maybe animal nutrition, and out of it, you key into this particular issue, you ask yourself which is the institute that is supposed to deal with the matter. And then you key that institute into what you are going to do as a national program. But this is not happening. And so the disconnect, even between sectoral ministries. For example, the science and tech is like the mother, where everything you are doing, whether in the agricultural sector, in the health sector, in the environment, or even industrial, because these are the key areas where you have, they are all supposed to key into whatever is happening. But at the end of the day, what do you find? Even when you talk about this fund, I bet you the man holding the fund will not allow the process and procedure put in place for assessment of the fund to happen. We had the same thing with NAFDA. When the National Biotechnology Development Agency came on board, they were supposed to be like funders. But today, NAFDA is the one doing the research on biotechnology. And is forgetting the institutes that are having mandates already that are doing that. So this is where we always get it wrong. It's not because we don't have, master plans or we don't have ideas on how to run things. But overall, the bottom line, if Nigeria is to get it right, is key to whatever we're saying. And I think the relationship between the research institute, the university, because let's not forget, the universities are not into applied research per se. And even in the US, when you talk about, you see that they create a specialized center
distinct from the faculty, programs. But what they do is to aggregate whatever research work that is having a potential to be pushed through the funnel into these centers, so that the centers can go in there with a different orientation to look at how that research can be taken forward. And I will tell you, China was a very good example that we saw. What they did is, in each research institute, they have what they call spin-off companies. And the spin-off companies are to take those potential, research, products that have capacity to transform into products that the country can benefit from, and take it to the spin-off company. Now, the researcher who is in the research institute can go on sabbatical here to help in pushing the technology forward, and then it is from there the venture capitalists can now see that, look, this particular product from the prototype, when we take it further, it is capable of doing this and capable of doing that. That is the utility value that I'm talking about. But what we have today in the research institute system, even when you see all these fears and whatnot, are prototypes that if you ask them to even give you the design, they may find it very difficult to. This is where we get it wrong. And like I want to always say, the funding of this research institute has always been suspect. Brazil did not achieve the point I'm making to you because they did not fund. No, they funded. I'm aware, for example, they funded their research system with $1 billion year on year for 10 years consecutively. And what did they do? They send their researchers to the best places to go and do their masters and PhD, and by the time they come back, they have that node, that linkage, because it's innovation. Somebody must have this to help you move this, the other person must have this to help you move this, and they are able to do that. So if we are to get it right, honestly, we have all it takes to get it right. But it has to do with the fact that in many instances, the policymakers, he has painted a very clear picture. When the policymakers come, the politicians, their interest is that thing, quick fixes. And research system will not give you quick fixes.
Yeah, Senator.
So this is a disadvantage.
Yeah, Senator Sabi Abdullahi, thank you very much. Let's return to Tilewa Adebajo in our Lagos Network Center. Mr. Adebajo, one of the issues that emerged from our conversation yesterday, along with, of course, the many relevant points that you gentlemen have also raised today, has to do with the fact that funding of research cannot be from the public sector alone. We had the Director General of NIPRID, which is the Pharmaceutical Research Institute, talking about the fact that they have developed, some products, but unfortunately they are not able to commercialize. I just want to ask you again, back to the role of investment banking, but this time specifically with regard to fund managers. There are a number of wealthy Nigerians who have funds that are being managed, by a number of fund managers, either here or outside. Why is it our national experience that we don't have many wealthy Nigerians who are funding specific forms of research? You're familiar with this. I mean, a wealthy American will say, look, we want to fund research into Alzheimer's disease because either their father or mother passed on account of that. Malaria has been the leading cause of deaths in this country. Unfortunately, I'm not aware of any wealthy Nigerian who has put in money to say, look, let us fund research into a vaccine for malaria. Instead, you Swiss companies that are finding research into malaria vaccine, as well as other tropical or subtropical diseases. Why, again, is that we don't have wealthy persons, being lured into taking part of the funds, the huge funds that they have, into research?
Right. Thank you very much for that. I think, first of all, the objective of any responsible fund manager is to manage the funds of his clients in a very responsible manner, to protect it and to ensure returns over time. And that is why a fund manager survives. Let's take a look at what you're saying. America has a very structured approach to a lot of all these things. First of all, there is a structure in which you want to put this money into, and you know how this money is working. And you know exactly what is going on with this money. So I think it's important that we define that. So when you have a structure, and not only do you have a structure that can manage that money that you're saying you donate money to Alzheimer's, then you also get a tax break from the government by making those sort of donations. The incentives are there to be able to put all this money into there. So the structure has to be there first, and second, the incentives for the government to be able to fund a lot of what you're saying. Let us take a look at the success of certain companies, because as Dr. Omar said, predominantly most of the institutes are public, but let us take a look at a successful example in Nigeria, and I think we can look at that. Nigeria is the largest producer of cassava in the world, and also the largest producer of yam. We're very strong producers of cowpea, and we're also strong producers of soybean, which is a recent product, but we've not been able to grow enough soybean to meet our local demand. So we still have an import gap in that produce. But the agency that has made this thing possible for us is the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture in Ibadan. They've been very successful over the years in developing high-yield varieties of these produce that we're #1 in the world. Based upon their research, a lot of the international companies have taken some of these seedlings and they're marketing them in other developing countries, including Brazil. So a lot of the cassava you see that is grown in other parts of the world are strains that have been developed by IITA in Nigeria that have been successfully commercialized. So the pharmaceutical research, public research company you're talking about in Abuja that developed these sickle cell drugs, the fact is that there are many Nigerian pharmaceutical companies and there are protocols that you have to go through in terms of testing drugs through the drug agencies, NAFDAC, for approval. I think it's important they go through those protocols, get the NAFDAC approval, and work, first of all, with the Nigerian pharmaceutical companies that are established here to be able to take on the product and sell it. I think that is really a low-hanging fruit, and I think that that route to market with that product is quite clear. So if you take a look at who is funding the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, like you said, they're foundations, like Ford Foundations, Rockefeller Foundations. You know Ford, they make Ford Motors, Rockefeller, and these are huge foundations that have decided to set up and put money into these sort of foundations. Nigerians are also a bit skeptical because there's so many scams. People will come and say they want to collect money on this and that, and then 2 years later you find that it has folded up. So credibility is an issue whereby high net worth individuals have not yet found credible local organizations where you can put in money. Take a look at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They're actively involved in Nigeria, and they're partnering with Nigerians or wealthy Nigerians also to be able to do projects and research projects in Nigeria. So I think, yes, while a lot of this funding, the development funding or the incubation funding will come from these foundations to be able to bring these products to a level, then once you take that products and they're proven and tested, then the venture capitalists and investors can now come in. So most of the money you see that is doing a lot of all this research, as you've said, are donations from wealthy individuals and from foundations. They do that research because that is long-term, taking a gestation period. And when you take it to a particular level, that happens. IITA has been in this country for many years, since the 60s. And, you know, they've been very successful, not only in developing things for Nigeria, but the rest of tropical agriculture. And I think that is a model that we should all look at and we can study to be able to make a success of whatever is done. Because in Nigeria, there are success stories in terms of what you're talking about, commercialization. And I think IITA is something that is new. And like I said, my advice to the pharmaceutical company with the sickle cell drug is to make sure you have your NAFDAC approval, which is there, and then work with, there are many Nigerian pharmaceutical companies. You need to buy into those companies first. And once they have bought into that, it's very easy these days to be able to take a drug globally.
Thank you indeed, Tilawa Aldebajo. But just to inform you that hybrid, with respect to sickle cell drug, has passed through the stage of NAFDAC and all of that, have gone beyond that with respect to that particular drug. In fact, it is global. It's being used. But what Dr. Adigwe told us, which Kingsley highlighted, was the new drugs that can cure tuberculosis and diabetes. That's the ones that are in the shelf at the moment, which of course you may be talking about in terms of going to register them and all of that. But that of sickle cell has been registered, as we know it. And in the course of your contribution, one of our guests was not agreeing on one aspect of what you said, but when it's time for him to talk to us again, maybe he could make reference to that. But for now, let's take a short break. But when we get back,
Petroleum Product Marketing Company, a subsidiary of NNPC. There are significant price discrepancy between Nigeria and its neighbors across Africa. There's a discrepancy of between 150 to 250 naira. That creates an incentive for arbitrage, whereby smuggling triumphed by taking petroleum product across the neighbors so that they can be sold at higher price. While the smugglers are making the money, Nigeria is paying for it. And that payment is distorting everything that we do in terms of planning, in terms of our ability to fund, and thereby taking money that is meant for development. The introduction of this Operation White will have a reduction of close to 6 million liters on a daily basis, which if you take an average of 150, translate to a saving of over 1 billion naira every day. That is the benefit of Operation White, and we have started seeing the great benefit.
Don't you people sell imported materials here? As beautiful as the shop is.
Auntie, buying foreign goods does not help our economy. Neither does it boost local production. And the good thing is Nigerian-made products are high quality. Really? And to make Nigeria great again, that is why I only sell made in Nigeria products. Because change begins with me.
I'm convinced. Change begins with me too. Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We have a number of tweets already, and Kieran and I will go through those tweets very quickly, and then we'll return to our guests. Sunny Michael Makoji, if our authorities are serious, the views and comments of people on this program can serve as a guide towards getting good results. Unfortunately, that doesn't appear to be the case. However, I'm waiting for a time when Nigeria will translate media blueprints into reality.
Now, from Festus Akimbewa, if we want to increase commercialization of research in our country, we must focus on the level of demand for it from businesses and organizations. Without a healthy commercial demand for research, the scope of universities to engage more in it will be limited.
Abiodun Afolabi, our research institutes and administrators need to focus on innovation that supports economic development and programs that address vital challenges in the society. That makes it easy for commercialization.
Chris Simeon, the reports must provide comprehensive science-based information on common costly medical conditions and new healthcare technologies and strategies.
Now, Oladimeji Morufo, it must be a problem-solving research. It may be short, medium, or long-term. Policymakers must stop wasting our human and material resources.
Omobola says every adventure is targeted at a goal. The purposes of research funding are problem-solving. How many of Nigeria's myriad quagmires have researchers solved? Both the researchers and the concerned stakeholders must ensure funds are not thrown away. It must be result-driven.
Now, Nwogogo Silvanus said it is sad that the labors of universities and dedicated students are allowed to waste while government at all levels, governments at all levels, pay lip service to building a strong economy. Now, who can tell us why Innocent Motors is not being patronized, supported, or encouraged by government, National Assembly, and the judiciary? Commercialization of research findings is a mark of sincere commitment to development, wealth creation, and building a strong economy.
All right. Utolo Sunday, the research institutions need to sell themselves and convince the private sector to have confidence in them. Government, on the other hand, should make the research grants result-based, not grants that will be used to buy exotic cars like National Assembly.
Dele Jack Solomon, whether you are a researcher, scientist, or not, we all know Nigeria's inability to turn research products into tangible developmental outcomes is hurting the country's economic growth. We know where the problem lies. Let's together fix it. Okay, so those are the twists that we'll take in the meantime. The twists, of course, are in consonance with the views being expressed by our guests. Dr. Umar Bindri, one of the sound bites you gave while responding to some of our questions and also elaborating on your perspective is we have not reached the stage, as it were, of maturing out of policy. So, we have policies on research institutes. Everybody will be quoting their mandate. This is the law establishing us, X, Y, Z. They have their own bureaucracies. But how do we now mature out of the policy into real work? And in responding to that question, I would also like you to tackle what appears to be, the prevalent silo mentality. Everybody does their own, keep it to their chest, and nobody goes on. You are looking for your own budget, everybody looking for their own budget, year in, year out. And in the meantime, we stagnate and left stranded.
Yeah, thank you very much. You see, that's why I mentioned very, very briefly the issue about the Nigerian Policy on Science and Technology and that council. That council is the key coordination facility. Let people not get me wrong. Nigeria is very good in terms of the science ecosystem. Our scientists are working very well. You see them, they are marketed out of Nigeria. They are very good. They are coming up with fantastic things. But I'm telling you, today, if you are looking at any website or any institution to tell you exactly what is the research strategy of Nigeria, what are we researching on, what are the outputs, you will not get this in one place. Universities will tell you, if you go to convocation ceremonies, you'll get a big booklet. In that booklet, what you are supposed to get is what actually has the university been able to do to impact on the national development. But what do you get? It's like an album. ETF lecture theater here, ETF library new here, and you don't get how many hardcore PhDs, what are the titles, how many patents have been licensed to industry, how much money is coming into the university because of your... You don't get that. We need to set that agenda, and that agenda cannot be set if it is Minister of Science and Technology that says university. University is under Minister of Education. It cannot happen. If it says research institutes in agriculture, Minister of Agriculture will say, is that your mandate? That is why that coordinating council is very important. The word for linking our own science, technology, and innovation to industry must be the words of the president. And nobody can beat that. Secondly, you see, our engineering is also maturing. Unfortunately, like Kirian said, we are hungry about imported stuff. Even if you look at the functional industry in this country, people don't know. I was Director General of NOTAP. Software. In NOTAP, we were the first to attempt to crack the dominance of software coding and development by foreign countries. And then we popped out companies like Computer Warehouse Group and many others based on certain very strong-headed policies. Otherwise, every bank, every financial institution is using imported software. And once you are using imported software based on license, your body is open. You are using other people's product to harness. You heard of all these EPs and so on and so forth. It's all the same thing. Secondly, if you look at the big companies operating in Nigeria, Procter & Gamble, they use their own research facilities, their own. Nestle, I've visited the place. They use their own research. The cement people, they use their own research institutes. You get what I mean? But for us to be able to mature to the next level, this council has to, based on evidence, deploy exactly the same thing that we are doing with rice. you have to close your borders on science and technology. You must make sure that if we can be able to get Innocent, to get tractors and so on, where does he get his knowledge from? Maybe University of Maiduguri is providing him carburation know-how, and so on and so forth. Maybe Ibadan is giving him information we must allow it to happen. So we must do this border closure, not just on rice, but also on knowledge, on science, technology, and innovation.
What happened to Steer in Bauchi?
Steer tractors, is a license. It's operating. There are many. Mercedes was also there. You remember Anamco,
yes.
All of them were operating on license, but the know-how was not Nigerian.
Yeah. The know-how was not Nigerian. That's exactly the truth. You were talking about utility of the available products in Nigeria, but we have satellites in the orbit in this country that are drastically not adequately utilized. I mean, I don't understand what do I put it now? I don't understand the reasoning behind one preferring to import a product that exists here for the purpose of giving a contract for people to bring it and make money out of it. There's no reason why we should have a satellite in the orbit and our banks are telling you that their internet is slow, please wait, and all that, when we have a satellite that is directed on Africa. So for me, I don't understand it. I have had the...
Kyria, you've always raised this point. Let me, Dr. Binder is saying, look, the fulcrum, for activating all of this to be sure that things work well will be that Council on Science and Tech. But I'll just some for a practical challenge. I think you and I were on set when we had one of the former ministers. He was talking about the experience in the Federal Executive Council at the time he was there, and that experience has been there for many years. You were secretary to the state government of Adamawa. Look, a federal an executive council isn't a parliament where you debate and debate, everybody comes with their own members, still the same silo mentality. How might such a council, such as you are talking about, be activated so that it becomes an engine room, as it were? You point to Sabi Abdullahi, Senator, say your ministry is supposed to have done this one. You point to you. Let's come back with reports, and then we evaluate those reports and keep going. How should that be done?
That council was supposed to meet minimum, because of the busy schedule of President, quarterly, at least four times in a year. And you see, when you have an agenda for development, I give you a very narrow example. Let's say fertilizer. Fertilizer is required to boost agriculture production. If this country today decides to look at the bandwidth of fertilizer from organic to inorganic, to say that the knowledge, the science on our soils, the kind of crops we grow, the kind of animals that we breed, and so on and so forth, this is what they require. Who does what? And we have the landscape of all the research institutions and universities. You get what I mean? And then everybody has to agree. Industry must agree that, yes, at a point, we must have factories to do with our organic fertilizer or inorganic. Finance must agree that the funding priority to now domesticate the know-how and the industry of fertilizer is our agenda for the next 3 years. The Ministry of Industry and so on, this is the agenda where everybody must accept. And for everybody to accept, that is why the wisdom of putting the president as the chair comes in.
And everybody accepts. And I was going to the senator with us here. Why? Because when I was painting a scenario of non-utilization of what we have, I was actually, coming to you to bring it to the agricultural level, because I know that we had issues, during our Obasanjo administration where we tried to, export cassava. That was returned, because they said it didn't pass, quarantine and all that. And they also know now that it's also affecting some of the agricultural produce in Nigeria, which are supposed to be exported outside the country. The quarantine service is not deployed to ensure that all the goods pass the required standard, globally. Now, talking about leveraging on what we now know in science is about concerning agriculture. What is the role of the National Assembly? Because I was told here by your members on another edition of this program that they were not carried along with respect to the satellites. That if they were carried along, they would have made a law that will, force people, business, concerns in Nigeria, like the GSM operators, to hook onto Nigeria's own, satellite.
Well, I think the fundamental thing here is in many of these issues, of course, they are so interrelated. But in this interrelationship, you must all agree that you are working for a common goal. Now, it is that lack of consensus on saying, look, we are working on a common goal that always make everybody to go to what my friend here is talking about, the silos mentality. Because the truth is, for every product, in every system, there are interrelationship and interdependencies. And where you realize that that interdependency must be for a common goal, then everybody will play in accordance to that principle, so that at the end, whatever you are contributing, you know is a component part of the whole, and that you are doing it knowing fully well that the end product is beneficial to everybody. Now, within the context of the agricultural sector, for example, yes, it's easy for people to make so many examples. The research institutes, earlier on somebody was talking about cassava. The National Root Crop Research Institute in Umudiki was actually involved very heavily in the cassava research and even in the yam research. So it's not just the IITA that is having more or less like an international agenda. Now, within that context, I think we should sometimes also begin to respect, because it's the lack of paying attention to what you have. And I'll give you an example. There was a time some state governments left the shores of Nigeria to go to Malaysia and other countries. They want those people to come and help them with oil palm and everything. And they told them, no, you left the masters back in your home. And that is where the problems are. If, for example, the state governments are also patronizing what the research institutes are doing in terms of helping them to outscale whatever technology they have, we will have also made progress. But in many instances, they are not being patronized. And so, if you look, for example, in the livestock sector, you can't conduct livestock research without keeping the same livestock. You must feed them. But how do you fund them? You fund them through what you call capital. So, if capital is not released, the animal will have to wait. The animal will also have to wait until you do procurement. It's only in Nigeria that things are done this way. You don't bring a straitjacket situation. And I'll give you a classical example. For example, the Research Institute, what they are suffering from is that you bring in a procurement system that deals only with building. For people who are going to be involved in doing a research work where they are supposed to go to the laboratory at certain designated time. And to me, this is the major reason why Nigeria has not been able to get any of the research institute to have ISO certification. And it is the ISO certification that will put integrity to the research system, which will tell the investor that yes, there's integrity in this process, I believe in this system, and I believe in the result. And that if you tell me, if I do A, B, C, D, I will get X, Y, Z, I believe in it because the process you have used is one that has integrity in it. And so to me, these are some of the issues and challenges, because in some instances when we talk, if you see the fault of the rat as being a thief, you must also believe that that other thing that smells too much to attract the rats to be a thief.
Well, Senator Sabi Abdullahi, I mean, thank you very much. We all have a sense of what the challenges are, but it's to focus attention on what needs to be done and then getting ahead to doing those things that we will need to do. Well, gentlemen, I mean, you have elaborated quite appropriately on the issues, but let's just get the closing thoughts from Tilewa Adebajo in our Lagos Network Center. Mr. Tilewa Adebajo, you've had the opportunity of consulting, for governments both here and outside of this country. What do we need to tweak in order to get some of these things right? Because when you look at the plenitude of research institutes in the country, and then the potential inherent in those institutes, and then how this can, in terms of spin-off, help us, with our growth and development, plus the role of financing, what is it that we need to get right?
I think, like Dr. Umar said, that we have the talent is not deniable because Nigerians have excelled both in Nigeria and abroad. And as the senator said, the key issue is the fact that the standards of our research facilities is not yet what is sometimes has dropped over the years from being high research facilities to substandard now, and most of them cannot even meet the ISO certification. I've always said it. I think take a look at what IITA is doing. It's not magic. It's very simple. They're just structured, they're organized, and they're able to attract funding from all over the world. If we have a good research facility here, even if it's public and it's well structured, it has transparency, it has accountability. Not only government money will fund there, but you begin to attract private sector money, international donor funding, foundation money will come into it. So what we need to do is that we need to look at a structural orientation, reform our systems, and begin to align ourselves with international global best practices. Once we do that, I think the funds will flow because the talent is here. Thank you.
In fact, Kingsley, just yesterday, the Ondo State government, launched an industrial hub. It is part of what we're talking about, an industrial hub that will have a lot of machinery, that people could use to, produce. So that's a very good step. On this note, gentlemen.
Yeah, but Kyria, that's fine. I know you're going to sign off the guests now, but Senator Sabi Abdullahi mentioned one point, and I think that we should also underscore that. NIPRID yesterday did talk about the collaboration they are having now with the Kaduna State government to develop derivatives from Dogoyaro, for instance, and several other things. They are in collaboration with about 10 states, but there are several other opportunities. How well are the subnational entities even relating to the research institutes? Is it only federal government?
All right. Okay, at this point, I would like to appreciate all of you for your contributions. Dr. Omar Binder, former DG of National Office for Technology Acquisition and Promotion, NOTAP, and of course, former Secretary to the Government of Adamawa State. It's been a pleasure talking to you on this topic.
Thank you very much.
All right, and Senator Sabi Abdullahi, Deputy Chief Whip of the Senate, it's also a pleasure. Of course, we know you have a background as a former head of the Planning Agricultural Research Institute of Nigeria. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And Tilawa Adebajo, an investment banker, he's been very enlightening, sharing your thoughts this morning on Good Morning Nigeria. Thank you for coming. All right, next is sports.
Harda and Ofyong